is Wednesday, 29th of July, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory board. And a fly came into my podcast today. That's amazing. Now, yesterday we looked at international revenue, and the question was, do the economics transfer? And remember, we are talking about how to go international from the advisory board's perspective. And when we're talking about economics transfer, is actually when you have your business in one geography, one jurisdiction, those economics work perfectly fine where you are. But when you're looking into expanding into different geographies, different jurisdictions, that those economies really transfer to the next one, or is something actually is like a vanity move, right? So it doesn't sound very nice, but actually sometimes is that what it is. Now, let's assume that actually what we discussed yesterday, travels is implemented in other countries. You get the quality of the revenue they're looking for, the profit, the margin, the cash flow, etc., etc. So today the move is to the bottom of the advisory board operating system model, which is where we have our performances, your governance, risk, and compliance based on your assets, right? So let's take a look at this today, because the business are going international is where the noise usually starts. And we discussed a little bit about that yesterday. Today we are going to get more in details about this. So we're looking more into we have more markets to manage, more suppliers, more data, more customer promises, more reporting packs, and more expectations, not only internal expectations or investor expectations, but also from our market, our customers, our company, our people, our deliveries. Yeah, but not always more is true, and this is something we have to look into. That is the risk today. So the operational noise, the business starts receiving more information and understanding less, and this is a quite dangerous situation to be. So each market tells its own story, each partner uses its own language, each team reports slightly differently, and each system has its own version of what happened, because at the end the systems are reporting, and when you do reporting, pretty much you're auditing the past. You're not having a live dashboard of what is going on right here, right now. So you as a founder or you as a board member or part of the executive team get pulled into what is called translation. And it's not the language translation in different languages. It's not a control system. That is the guessing game with a bigger map, right? So you're going to trying to pull all that information and make it work so it makes sense. What are the markets really saying about what we do and how we do this, right? Because it's not about anymore about revenue economics. It's about systems, controls, governance, risk controls, etc., etc. So let's take a look at three problems with this. Problem number one is resilience being described but not proven, right? So we can say, and remember, we have three legs in resilience, which is operational, prevention, and economics. But in this case, is described, but not really proven. What is the evidence of the things that we are saying in terms of resilience? So a board cannot rely on statements such as, "Oh, we are resilient because A, B, C, D." Perfect. Where is the proof of that, or the evidence of how we are supporting that statement? Or the team has it covered, and you heard that so many times. Oh, we have covered. We have the team. Everybody's on board. Well, you need to prove that. You need to provide the evidence of that. It's not a tagline anymore. You have to provide hard evidence of those taglines. So, what service matter most, and how you prove that? What happens if that fails, and how you prove that? And which is a recovery plan? You have to prove the evidence of that. Meaning actually control the processes. What are what triggers what at what time, and who are accountable? Who's the people responsible for what? And how fast can they recover, right? So who owns that response? As I mentioned, responsibility. So problem number two is cybersecurity is one thing, but third-party risk expanding with the map. So it's the two things, because remember, in terms of cybersecurity, corporate security, it's not just about your devices, your hardware, your software. When people are traveling, they are leaving things behind. A conversation in an airport can be overheard by somebody else. And believe me, I've been in places where people was listening actively what was said on the next table. And this happened. There's nobody told me this. When we got trainings about this back in the 90s, I say, careful how you speak in public places about company information. We were like a ha ha ha. Now, as times evolved, I just start to understand that people overheard conversations of people in every place, right? So if you go to a cafe to have a chat, very bad idea if you're going to discuss business plans or budgets or whatever is the case. And this where people are leaving papers in hotel rooms, in meeting rooms, in airports or cafes with very sensitive information. So when the people are all panicking about cybersecurity, also look into what is the behavior of people in terms of protecting the data of the information. And conversation overheard on the phone, but you're speaking on a public place on the phone, you're already giving away a lot of information for people that are listening, particularly if you're going into tenders, if you're going to different countries, and English is pretty much the average language that everybody speaks in business nowadays. So people are hearing, and actually, believe it or not, I've been in tenders with large corporations, and guess what? Was not strange that many of us were sharing the same flight to the same location. So we were ha ha, he ho ho, hello, how are you doing? But everybody's paying attention what the other guys were meeting with in the airport, who's going picking them up, where they're going, where hotels they were going, and what they were doing in that city. Sounds silly, but it's a reality. Now, more countries and more partners mean more access points, as I mentioned too. So it's not all negative, but you have to be careful. So more systems, more data movement, and more dependencies. So a weak third party can become the unknown access backdoor into the whole business. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you get blindsided, but even your own partners, because they have a weak process too. So you have to help them to understand which are the process or the right process to go through this. Problem number 3 is a weak controls. So that becoming those controls are becoming visible too late, usually when something already happened. So poor data handling, unclear access rights, loose escalations, and local workarounds that start to get normalized may not hurt on day one. They hurt when an incident lands, a customer complains, an audit starts, or the board needs a clean answer quickly. And all of a sudden, you start to realize that actually that you have a big problem underneath because these controls are not there. So, in other words, imagine a cross-border operating system as an aircraft dashboard. But we don't need to go as complex as an aircraft, just your car dashboard. If every dial is flashing, but none of them tells the same story, the problem is not information. You have an overflow of information. The problem is how you control that information and where you pay attention to the things that are relevant and important for your to make a decision. So, as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. First, build an operational spine. So that means documenting the processes that must be common across all markets. And believe it or not, you have certain amount of processes and systems that can be 80% across the board. It's exactly the same thing: a CRM system, an operating system, a databases, how you organize your databases, security clearances for different databases of access to information, etc., etc. You can localize what is the law, the accounting, and other health and safety, you name it. All these things can be variables, but 80% of how you operate is very likely that it's exactly the same. So you have a common systems and processes and operational procedures across the whole organization when you're going to different geographies. For example, how customers are onboarded. This is something else that you can have that is common for everybody. How is pricing approved? How is delivery quality checked? How are expectations escalated? How are partners reviewed? How are incidents recorded, right? So all these are things that pretty much are common for any other geography. So without that common spine, expansion becomes very noisy and very fast, because every single body have a different process and ways to do things, and that start to get very chaotic. The second thing is force governance visibility, right? So the board should be able to compare, or the board or yourself as an owner, the founder, or executive team, should be able to compare performances across units and markets without relying on local storytelling. Storytelling is good for marketing and selling, but when you have performances under your scope, the things that you have to measure are exactly the same thing everywhere else, right? So you, again, there are 80% that are exactly the same. You can have certain amount of percentage of things that are local because of the laws of you understand what I'm saying. So that does not mean every market looks identical, right? It means the core signals are comparable. So revenue quality, margins, delivery performances, customer issues, control expectation, partner performances, cash timing, etc., etc. So each market uses a different measure. The board is not governing the international business. It's listening to separate stories all the time. And that is where I mentioned is start to translate things into make sense of what is those stories are telling, rather than to having a single language for everything. So the third thing to consider is test, operation, and repeatability. And again, we're going into these kind of things of patterns, repeatability, transferring predictions, etc., etc. And prediction, I remember we said yesterday, it doesn't mean that actually you are reading the future. It means that you can have a visibility of what's going to very likely to happen. And this predictability, when it's happening, is confirmed. But you don't have to have a crystal ball to understand the future or guess the future. It's actually, this is very likely to happen because we have all this plan in place and controls. Now, what is repeatability? Can the operating model repeat without chaos, right? So can delivery quality, the quality delivered stay consistent? Can the management reporting arrive on time? Can the company hold control without the founder or the executive team or the board standing in the middle of every important conversation? This is where the advisory board earns its place, right? So it brings outside expertise across governance, controls, cybersecurity, reporting, operating design, and recovery planning. Very important. Things like that an advisory board brings to the table are, for example, the business has more reporting, very good, but not more clarity. So how we bring clarity to this reporting, and remember, this is a translation portion. Do we really need to translate this, or probably we are not speaking the same language where we should be speaking the same language? It's like operational models work locally, that's very good, but not consistently across markets, right? And I heard this so many times. They say, "Oh, you don't understand. We are different." Bad news for you, pal. Unfortunately, you are not. It's exactly the same, but people try to accommodate to their own comfort, and this is a reality. And I've been working in very, very stressed, economically stressed geographies, and guess what? When you put these certain order and processes and systems and operational procedures, people start to see the order is good, and they start to come together. And guess what? In less than a quarter or a year, things are being managed very, very locally in a very, very disorganized way. And that's the way we do business here. All of a sudden start to come into line, and everybody was very clear what they needed to do, how to do it, and the timelines and sequencing. So don't buy into this, oh, this is the way that we do things, so here are things are done differently. Just make sure that you have your 80% basics in order, so you can invite people to join you to that order, which is your organization, right? So other things that boards can bring to the table is founders still, or the executive team, or some of directors in control, still the control point between countries, right? So everything is bridging through them. This is a massive challenge. So you have to make sure that actually you have the right controls without the key people in a company always being dependency from them. So that's the kind of challenges that prevent expansion or expensive drift. And remember that we spoke about drifting last week. These kind of things actually drift company into bad places. Now, so what do you gain working with me? Three things: business outcome, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, an international operating layer that makes the company easier to trust, easier to finance, and harder to disrupt. The differentiator is a rotating international advisory board built around the exact system gaps in front of the company. So you get expertise across governance, control, cyber, reporting, operating, design, recovery. That's faster than hire one executive or the overhead of a large consulting firm. And guess what? There's no talent locked in. We can change members as we need them every 6 months or so. So the risk reduction is the operational noise. We reduce the operational noise, the translation efforts. The board gains comparable truth across markets instead of relying on disconnected local updates. Now, one action you can take home today, and we have our visual aid, obviously, for this one, which is the operational spine map. And what that means. This means that you can show the 5 processes that must be standard across the market. This is something I discussed already, right? So what is the things that you have to standardize? Pick 5, start with 5. Don't go for everything. Like, take the 5 most important, let's say. Show the 3 largest third-party dependency. Then show your core KPIs by market. And then show the single point where visibility currently breaks. And guess what? If nobody agrees with where visibility breaks, that's exactly where you need to start. But you already have a map where to start, how to start to put this together. Now, let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow we move into transformation, the reinvention, the innovation of your organization, the things that are making you relevant for the future and today. A repeatable operating model still is not enough if the business loses its coherence, leadership depth, or the edge as it grows. Now, if you are a founder, a chair, non-executive director, or part of the C-suite, and you want an international advisory board to turn international complexity into operating discipline, let's have a 30-minute call so I can understand where you're coming from, where you are today, where you would like to go, and we can understand which models and which are the gaps that you need specialist support, and put it together tailored for your needs. So have a great day, and I'll